Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Marina and the Diamonds, titled Froot. This might be my most requested review ever. Not the new Kendrick Lamar, or the new Modest Mouse, or the new Of Montreal, or the new AWOL Nation. This album. And I want to make this clear, I've been getting requests to cover Marina and the Diamonds since way back in 2013, back when I first started this channel. This has been a pop act I have been so inundated with requests to cover that it's been a real struggle for me not to immediately drop into backlash mode. Because let's be blunt here, when I get this many requests for an album, it's either massively popular, in this case, it's really not. It's incredibly good, that remains to be seen here, or it's so massively overrated with a diehard fan base that won't stop requesting, even though I've said I will cover it multiple times. So now that time has come to prove myself right or wrong. Marina and the Diamonds. Not a band, but the solo project of Marina Diamandis, English pop singer-songwriter who made her big debut in 2010 with The Family Jewels. And as a debut in an era where UK pop was finally starting to make a splash stateside, it was a wildly varied, genuinely interesting pop album that crossed a lot of styles, featured Marina's unique vocal range and style, and had some genuinely intelligent lyrics I really liked. A lot of critics make comparisons of her as a cross between Lady Gaga and Kesha, but I'd argue there's a much easier comparison point in sound and style. Natalia Kills. But while Kills is more driven by icy or hip-hop styles, Marina was more instilled by the garish, more theatrical indie baroque pop scene in the late 2000s, from acts like mid-period Sia or Lily Allen. But the Natalia Kills comparison does work on some level. They're both playing a similar blend of rough-edge glam, they both have a theatrical presence in their lyrics and their delivery, and they both were better writers than your average pop starlet. But here's the thing, Natalia Kills really stuck to her guns, and even though her sophomore album Trouble sold pretty terribly, it was still an improvement across the board and probably an album that I underrated when I first reviewed it. Marina and the Diamonds, on the other hand, got on board with Dr. Luke, Circuit, Diplo, and Greg Kurstin, and suddenly all the personality and lyrical flavor that I liked about that first album seemed to evaporate. I mean, sure, the femme fatale persona could have worked for her, she's got the voice for it, but the self-awareness in the songwriting and the painfully generic electropop production, it just did nothing for it here. Yeah, there were some moments that clawed back some of that real personality, but not enough to save Electra Heart from just being painfully generic for me. It just did not stand out at all. Real sophomore slump. So I'll admit to being at least a little bit interested when I heard that her newest album, Froot, was going to be pitching all the big name producers something much more self-contained, with only a single producer besides Marina working on it. Would this mean more of her unique personality and songwriting skill return to the forefront? Could we have indeed a good album here? Well, I've got good news and I've got bad news on this front. The good news is that, yes, this album definitely feels a lot more like a Marina and the Diamonds album in terms of its writing, and doesn't nearly feel as homogeneous and forgettable as Electra Heart. But the bad news is that even despite regaining some of the spark, the shift in focus on this album instrumentally and thematically means that it's just not connecting nearly as strongly as I'd like. In other words, it's a solid enough pop album, but it doesn't quite have the same energy or originality of the Family Jewels, and while it might have been the album that Marina needed to make to advance in this stage of her career, it's not one that really sticks with me, at least as much as I'd like it to. So okay, why is that? Well, let's start with Marina's performance. I found her evolution as a performer kind of fascinating, really, because it seems with every album after her very theatrical and stagey debut, she's opted for more and more restraint in her delivery, aiming to be more subtle. And while the sloppy auto-tune and vocal production masked a lot of those moments on Electra Heart, we get a lot more of it here. And while you definitely need it to pull off some of these songs, we'll get to that when we talk about the songwriting, some of the more basic pop songs could have used a little bit more of that old school bombast that I liked from her. Sure, we get the occasional vocal run from her, which I liked, but the swap of auto-tune with thicker reverb only mutes that spark of wild energy even further, and I gotta admit that's a disappointment. And frustratingly, some of that runs into the instrumentation and the production too. Now, let me stress that the slicker, new disco grooves and the reverb-saturated beats that Marina chooses to work with here on this album, they're a preferable choice to the rougher electro-pop that Dr. Luke gave her. The smoother textures match her voice a lot better, especially when she's playing more of the elegant femme fatale role. But what surprises me more here is that more of the baroque and chamber pop elements don't come back on this album, which leads to a lot of the instrumentation not exactly having a lot of unique character in comparison with most percussion over melody modern pop. Go with the slower tempos in the majority of these songs, it doesn't exactly lead to as many memorable moments or real powerful grooves on this record instrumentally. Now granted, Marina can still write a catchy as hell pop song, and there are some standout moments here, usually when she adds a little bit more texture courtesy of a bit of guitar, with the mid-tempo pop rock of Weeds with the washed out guitar solo which I liked, the more aggressive and melodic grooves of Better Than That and Forget, or the darker, more symphonic synth pop of Savages. Definitely like that song. But the songwriting has always been one of the elements that's drawn me to Marina and the Diamonds and kept me coming back. So what do we get here? Well, the first thing to know is that there's something of two underlying themes to this album, and a change in focus to a more inward-looking picture, which is different than either of our previous albums. The first thematic element is a breakup, but unlike most albums in this vein, it makes it very clear that Marina had to do the dumping, which does present a different picture, and to her credit, she does a fair job capturing the complicated emotions that come in letting somebody go that you still have some vestigial feelings for, but you gotta know that it has to end. And the best thing possible to make this work is the return of Marina's self-aware writing and good framing. Songs like I'm a Ruin, they walk a fine line in terms of dumping tracks. While I don't like the implication that she was doing things she shouldn't do in the meantime, that just is not a good implication, it mostly works as a song. Granted, it's the definition of mixed signals when you follow that track with Blue, which is a hookup track with said ex for all the wrong reasons, which at least she recognizes, but still mixed messages here. In any case, eventually the arc of the album allows her to put her feelings to bed, get comfortable with her being on her own, and yet still feel some frustration when that ex makes bad hookup decisions on songs like Better Than That. She knows it's not her place to criticize him, but it's kind of hard to watch regardless, especially if feelings are resurfacing on tracks like Weeds. Those are very human songs, and they're really good executed in terms of pop tracks. So if that dramatic arc mostly works, what's the problem here? Well, that's only about half the album, the other half being a lot more scattershot. The album opens with the slow burn song Happy, where she seems to have found inner contentment, seems to have some strong implications that it's a divine figure in the song too, but okay, that's fine, I don't have a problem there. But the following tracks really don't follow in that vein and present a complementary picture. Hell, at this point I'm having a hard time getting a firm picture of Marina at all off of Froot, which, okay, might have been part of the point of Can't Pin Me Down, her feminist anthem coyly trying to pretend it's not one, implying that women are complicated and have more layers, and sure, I can agree with that. The problem here is that the various elements and layers of her persona on this album, they don't exactly all mesh together. The cooing sex kitten of the title track, the austere recluse of Solitaire, the outright nihilistic feelings of Savages, the vulnerable romantic of Immortal hoping to preserve her love forever and avoid that death. And when you compare all those songs to the defined maturity of the breakup arc on this album, the pieces, I'm sorry, they don't really add up for me. And when you add that layer of theatricality to it all, I don't get that same sort of visceral connection that I would typically get in some better pop music. At least with the Family Jewels, there was a layer of campy energy, and Marina had a ton of real exuberance to her performance that I liked and could draw me in. But by tuning all that back, I'm not getting that same connection or energy, and the overall result, it just feels a lot less cohesive. I'm sorry. Look, in the end, I do like this album, but not as much as I wanted to. Mostly because for every step towards innovation and returning to the elements that made her unique in her songwriting, the actual sound of this album doesn't exactly have the same flair or color. And even with that, I can't help but feel that only half the songs on this album feel thematically relevant. Thankfully, Marina is still a solid singer with real personality, and she can definitely write good hooks, which is enough to elevate this album to a very light 7 out of 10 and a recommendation, but a qualified one. If you're a die-hard fan of Marina and the Diamonds, you've probably been asking about me to cover it for months now. But for everyone else, give the Family Jewels a listen first, and then check out Froot. You can avoid Electra Heart. I'm still not quite sure Marina and the Diamonds is quite living up to her potential just yet, but at least it seems like she's finally on the right track. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Yes, I'm going to be covering Kendrick Lamar. I need a few more listens to fully take it in and process it. Give me a little bit more time here. But until then, if there's anything else you want me to review or anything else that I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.